Western Australia shortly, where dawn services are just wrapping up. We'll also be live in cities across the country this hour as marches get underway. From Melbourne and Sydney to Mildura and Albany, thousands are expected to take part in commemorative events across the nation. The alleged killer of a 19-year-old woman dies in custody after being charged with her murder earlier this week. Hundreds of mourners attended a sunset vigil for Audrey Griffin yesterday on the New South Wales Central Coast. Vladimir, stop. The US president urges Russia's leader to halt the violence after 12 are killed in a missile attack on Kyiv. Donald Trump has accused Vladimir Putin of harming peace negotiations, saying the strikes were unnecessary. And more than 90,000 mourners filed past the body of Pope Francis, who's lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica. Italian authorities have tightened security around the Vatican as they prepare for the late pontiff's funeral. It's Friday, the 25th of April, Anzac Day. From the land of the Darug people in Parramatta in Western Sydney, this is ABC News Mornings. Anzac Day is being commemorated across the country, with tens of thousands of Australians gathering at events after dawn services. Veterans and their families are marking the 110th anniversary of the Gallipoli landings and remembering those who have served in the armed forces. More than 8,000 Australians were killed before the force was evacuated from the Gallipoli Peninsula in December 1915. In Sydney, a large crowd gathered at Martin Place to remember their sacrifice.
At this hour, upon the 25th of April in 1915, Anzac became one of the immortal names in history. We who are gathered here think of those who went out to the battlefields of all wars but did not return. We feel them still near us in spirit. We wish to be worthy of their great sacrifice. Let us therefore once more dedicate ourselves to the ideals for which they died. As the dawn is even now, inspire us to work for the coming new light into the dark places of the world.
The Prime Minister Anthony Albanese has returned to Canberra to mark Anzac Day at the Australian War Memorial. The dawn service began with the tones of the didgeridoo in honour of First Nations soldiers. Mr Albanese delivered the Anzac dedication and laid a wreath. Opposition leader Peter Dutton began with the lowering of flags to half-mast at the Shrine of Remembrance. In a video message, Mr Dutton says Anzac Day is one of Australia's most sacred days.
This year, marking 80 years since the end of the Second World War, we particularly express our gratitude to the 1 million Australians who served and served with great honour. We honour the 39,000 Australians who gave their lives. They experienced the horror of war to defeat tyranny and restore peace. As the custodians of that peace, it's our duty to deter tyranny and prevent catastrophic war. In that duty, may we never waver in effort, energy and endeavour, spurred on by the souls we commemorate on Anzac Day. Lest we forget.
Overseas, thousands turned out in New Zealand, remembering those who fought in the New Zealand Army Corps. Australians will be joined by New Zealanders at Anzac Cove in Turkey to mark the day. Melbourne's dawn service was marred by booing and heckling from a small group in the crowd during the Welcome to Country by Indigenous elder Uncle Mark Brown.
This morning, I'm here to welcome everybody to my father's country. Beautiful Boomerang country. But before we do that, we pay our acknowledgements and we pay our respects. We pay our respects to all of my ancestors. We pay our respects to all of my elders. And we pay respects to all of my community members.
Dawn services in Western Australia have just concluded. 30,000 people were expected at Perth's King Park to acknowledge and honour Australia's servicemen and women. Reporter Ruby Littler is there. Ruby, what can you tell us about the Perth service?
Well, the sun has risen along the iconic Swan River here in Perth, and the dawn service has just concluded at the War Memorial at Kings Park. Now, as I'm sure you can see behind me, people have remained after the service to pay their own personal respects to the servicemen and women of Australia, many of whom sacrificed their lives serving their country. Now, in the commemorative address this morning, veteran Arthur Leggett was well remembered. Now, he was a 106-year-old who only passed last month. He was the last surviving and oldest prisoner of war in WA, and he was well remembered in that commemorative address. He will be having a state funeral, and that's expected to happen in about 2 weeks on May 10th, another commemorating that 110th anniversary of the landing at Gallipoli. And something that's always quite heartwarming to see at an otherwise sombre and reflective occasion is just the sheer number of children here and young people standing side by side alongside family members and parents and grandparents in uniform. There are over 100 registered RSL services happening across WA this morning.
Sydney CBD is at a standstill with the Anzac Day March just getting underway. More than 12,000 current and serving members of the veterans of the Australian Defence Force will file past the Anzac Memorial to pay their respects to the fallen. Reporter Chantel Al-Khoury is there and she joins us now. Chantel, what's the atmosphere like?
That day, there were around 7,500 people here in Martin Place a little earlier for the dawn service ceremony. As you can see behind me, the Anzac Day March, the annual Anzac Day March has started. They're expecting around 12,000 participants, including former members of the ADF. It's being led by members of the Royal Australian Air Force and as well as members of the Army and Navy, and they're all marking this day, hoping to honour those who've served and continued to serve.
Chantel, what's happening after the march?
Well, after this march, we will be heading to Hyde Park, where there will be a commemoration service. That'll be next to the Hall of Remembrance at around 12:30. We're expecting many former and current members of the ADF, members of the community, as well as the Premier of New South Wales and the Governor of New South Wales as well.
Thanks, Chantel. Chantel Al-Khoury reporting there in Sydney. Anzac Day is being marked by current serving members of the Australian Defence Force here in Australia and abroad. They're reflecting on their own service and the sacrifices made not only by their comrades but also their families.
G'day, I'm Lieutenant Colonel J.D. Sanderson. I'm deployed on Operation Aslan as part of the United Nations mission in South Sudan. This Anzac Day, I'll be reflecting on my military service, our proud military history, and our peacekeeping legacy.
G'day, my name is Captain Tom Darzens and I'm currently on op accordion in the Middle East. This Anzac Day I'd like to shout out to my friends and family in Sydney and Melbourne and look forward to seeing them when we get back from this rotation.
Hi, I'm Lady Simon Jo Hill, currently deployed on Op Azurka. I'd like to thank all my family and friends for all your support throughout my career and throughout this deployment. I can't wait to get to see you all.
Anzac Day is special to me because my father served in Vietnam, and considering Anzac Day is an opportunity to reflect on those that have served. And whilst my father did come back from Vietnam and still suffered the ill effects of it, so I think it's a very poignant time for us to reflect on those that served at the highest level.
Hundreds have gathered in Papua New Guinea's capital to commemorate those who died in battles fought across the country. LPNG correspondent Marianne Farr was there.
Surrounded by rain trees and tropical flowers, this is the final resting place for more than 3,000 Australians who died while serving in Papua New Guinea. Their sacrifice has been remembered in a moving Anzac Day dawn service at the Bumana War Cemetery on the outskirts of Port Moresby. Thousands of Australian soldiers served in battles across Papua New Guinea during World War II, defending what was then an Australian territory from an invasion by Japanese forces. The service also paid tribute to the many Papua New New Guineans who assisted Australia and its allies during combat on the Kokoda track and in other parts of the country.
Their kindness, bravery and compassion were pivotal to the survival of many Australians. They too are part of the Anzac story.
The Bumama Cemetery is the largest war cemetery in the Pacific. It's a place where many Australians visit, whether to acknowledge a relative, to pay tribute to the deceased, or to enjoy a moment of serenity in the beautiful surroundings.
The US President Donald Trump has implored Russia to stop its deadly attacks on Ukraine as sensitive negotiations take place to reach a deal to end the long-running war. At least a dozen people were killed and almost 100 others were injured in the biggest assault on the capital Kyiv in almost a year. After criticising the Ukrainian president for refusing to surrender to Russian-occupied Crimea as part of a possible peace agreement, Mr. Trump insists he's not favouring Vladimir Putin and is lobbying him to come to the table.
He wouldn't be talking right now. He's talking, and we're putting a lot of pressure. I think he wants to make a deal. We're going to find out very soon, but it takes two to tango, and you have to have Ukraine want to make a deal too. They're being hit very hard.
What concessions has Russia offered up thus far to get to the point where you're closer to peace?
Stopping the war.
Russia illegally annexed Crimea in 2014 after a disputed referendum and launched its full-scale invasion of Ukraine in February 2022. The Kremlin now controls about 20% of Ukrainian territory. The peninsula changed hands from Russia to Ukraine during Soviet rule in 1954. Kyiv is rejecting any plan to give up any territory to Moscow, but many Crimean residents say they feel a part of Russia.
It is okay, because smart people understand that Crimea has never been purely Ukrainian. Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. It so happened that it was not quite correctly conveyed to Ukraine. Ukraine barely invested there. We had broken roads here. In general, Crimea has changed a lot for the better when it returned to its homeland as part of Russia.
The Ukrainian president has cut short his trip to South Africa after Russia's latest attacks on Kyiv. He wants the US to put more pressure on the Kremlin, saying he doesn't see signs the talks are preventing Russian aggression, despite Kyiv's willingness to negotiate.
The fact that Ukraine is ready to sit down at the negotiating table after a ceasefire, after a complete ceasefire with the terrorists who organised all this on our land, exclusively on our land, is a great compromise.
In excerpts of an interview to be broadcast on CBS this weekend, the Russian foreign minister says the US and Moscow are working together to end the war.
The President of the United States believes, and I think rightly so, that we are moving in the right direction. The statement by the President mentions a deal, and we are ready to reach a deal, but there are still some specific points, elements of this deal which need to be fine-tuned.
Well, the 90,000 mourners have so far paid their respects to Pope Francis, who's lying in state at St. Peter's Basilica. It's the second day of 3 days of public viewing after the pontiff